Hello, Laura. Welcome. I am so excited to have you here. We've been chatting ahead of the recording, and you've been sharing your beautiful energy, and my body is still like buzzing. And so, just thank you for this day where we get to share space and time. And everyone who is listening, prepare for whatever you are ready to receive. Lara is a powerful activator. I know this from being in her space many times. And really, what we receive is a matter of our own leading edge, dropping in. It's not necessarily what she says, what I say, it's what you are ready for. And just the open space that she creates and allows. I am so excited to introduce you to Lara Waldman. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and the magic you create on this planet?
Oh, well, I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much. So, yes, I'm Lara Waldman. I'm also known as the Wealth Accelerator. I'm the podcast host and author of Money Manifestation Mastery. I've been a healer, channel, spiritual coach for over 2 decades. And I now specialize in working with business owners to transform their blocks to owning their value and help them manifest high cash months. And this is in alignment with your heart, body, and soul. Transforming the world of wealth, one body, business, bank account at a time. And I live in London, England, with my two, well, one's an adult, one's a teenager, one's an adult, my husband. But I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada. So I've got a funny accent because I've been in the UK now for like 25 years. So that's a bit about me.
Love it. And what would you say is most alive on your personal leading edge? You lead a lot of other really powerful creators, entrepreneurs, healers, and you tend to be like receiving it and living it and then creating spaces where the rest of us can receive those activations as well. So like what is going on your leading edge right now?
You mean for me personally?
Personally, business wise, what
Hmm.
you're witnessing in the collective, really anything that wants to come
Okay.
through. It's welcome.
So I'm very visionary. I see what I would call the soul aligned potential for things. And I got a vision over 20 years ago for this time right here, right now, around what would be happening.
Mm,
And it's kind of funny because my visionary self is beautiful. Like the visions of what we're here to do at this time, what's happening on this planet is stunning in terms of, transformation, change. But also I know that the lived human experience of these changes are not always the same thing. So it's really, for me, very much about bridging the gap between the soul self, the heart self, and then how do we integrate that through the body and through our physical reality. So it's really important to me that I'm going to talk about some big, beautiful things, but also that bridging can also be challenging and intense as well in terms of the letting go. So I've just come out of a pretty intense, what I call the tumble dry of transformation of releasing and letting go of some very old, you could call it ancestral patterns. I've been doing in my personal life a lot of unhooking from family systems. I'm the first person in my family lineage to pull the plug on some of these patterns that I would say are to do with ancestral trauma that I've experienced in my life, but also down the line, I'm pretty obsessed with that. Like the healing and transformation we do from the past through the power of the present in order to grow and change into a new, more abundant future. And
mm.
that kicks my ass frequently, I'll be very honest, but it's
Love
all
it.
for a good cause because
Yeah.
what I've learned it's really how our human brains navigate change. Change is stressful. We're going to the unknown. We're letting go of our attachments to things, our need for control, our need for certainty. And the path of that heart, body, soul aligned path is not about that. It's not about clinging on. It's not about attachment. It's not about control. It's actually about deeply surrendering and deeply listening. So then on the other side of that, is this what I've been talking about all year is what I've been calling the wealth wave of 2024. There's this big, huge energy that's been coming in, and we've been getting ready for big, huge energy that is on an energetic level, incredibly powerful, incredibly beautiful. It's calling us home to who we truly are. It's stripping down all the bullshit, anything that's out of alignment with that. But as we're seeing on the planet, it's like that, even though it sounds great, like this big, amazing energy, it means that we have to face everything that isn't in alignment with that, right? The dismantling of the old systems, the dismantling of the old outdated ways of doing things. And so that can also, on a human level, can be very hard, which is why I want to, I always trying to bridge that gap. But yeah, so lots of growth in my business, lots of growth in my personal life, lots of growth everywhere. In some ways, I feel like I've been preparing for this time. My soul's been preparing me to lead in this time for about 25 years. So I spent the last 20 years just almost getting ready now to be able to really confidently lead, is what I would say as well. So I've been, having to overcome unbelievable amounts of fear and shame, and God knows all the things that have held me back from essentially being myself. And something's just unlocking right now where it's just time, and I don't have the same kind of fear. And it's like all the energy I've been using against myself, sort of fighting who I am and what I'm here to do. Right now, it feels like that veil has lifted, and
Mm.
it's very powerful. So I feel like through my body right now, I'm very much living my work, which is living abundance. So that's what's going on for me right
A
now.
little bit about my right now,
Just that.
the wealth wave of 2024, this time that you've been envisioning for decades, and it's here. And I love like that picture that you paint of like when we see it in kind of the 5D or the quantum, like the outside of time and space, like it's so beautiful, stunning, angelic energies, just like pure love frequencies. And why, when you ground that into the physical, like you would think that that would be just like the easiest thing in the world, like more love on the planet. Great, let's do it. Why is that so hard? Why does it create so much turbulence in the 3D?
Great question.
Love
So
it.
first of all, I was hanging out in the 5D for a lot of my 20s. And there's a lot of talk of the new earth and 5D. And I was like deep in all of that, which is great. And it is beautiful. And I can tap into all that, very easily. But the journey really is about bringing that consciousness, which you could call heart aligned consciousness, soul aligned consciousness, and manifesting it into physical reality. And so this was my biggest block, my biggest problem. I was having profound spiritual experiences, having profound results with my clients as a healer, but I was so stuck. I like to say stuck as fuck, like a truck in the muck, unable to move forward for
Yeah.
myself, And so I feel like I was bashing my head against brick wall. I was like, I've got this vision. I know what I'm here to do. Like, this is where we're going on the planet, the collective consciousness. Why is it not happening? And I spent a long time kind of arguing with my higher self about this. And then my guidance said, well, Lara, you have to leave your bedroom, actually be visible, let people know you exist, and actually take action. Like, you are the one that has to take action. We're going to help you, but
Wow.
you've got to like put yourself out there. And I was like, okay, that's why I don't want to do that. I mean, this was quite a long time ago now, but essentially, when you start bringing in those higher realms of consciousness, which you could call love, it shines a spotlight on anything that is not that. And we carry a lot in our beautiful bodies, in our sort of you could say in our nervous system, the hardwiring of our brain, in our energetic system, based on the lived experiences we've had thus far, which is a lot of pain and trauma and separation and hurt and harm, for a lot of people. I mean, there's different levels of safety and different levels of violence, different types of violence that we experience very commonly on this planet: physical violence, sexual violence, like racial violence,
Mm.
um, but also verbal violence. And that creates a shutdown. We go into, especially when we're sensitive, we go into sort of self-protection. And especially through those developmental stages, from just being grown in the womb, your nervous system's being developed in the womb, and all those particularly early developmental stages, it's all imprinting into who we are and how we are. And I've sort of obsessed on this for over 2 decades, like what's stopping us or blocking us from being our soul aligned self. And there's a lot there, there's a lot there. So there's, let's call it big T trauma, little T trauma, all the ways that we haven't been received, that we haven't been loved, that we haven't been held and made to feel safe. And then not only that, in our DNA, we know that there's what I call ancestral trauma. So
Right.
all the unprocessed pain of the past. And some bodies of work talk about being 7 generations. There's some ideas about being 14 generations back. So we're carrying a lot of ancestral wounding, ancestral trauma. The pain of Earth's history lives inside of our bodies. So we have to realize that even though this vision's beautiful, and like a lot of people say to me, it's almost like what they want is right there, but it's like there's this glass wall or glass ceiling, and you can see it, but you just can't somehow, there's this separation.
Yeah.
A lot of the work is about going and dismantling the old wounded ways, thoughts, beliefs, stories, patterns, program that's actually deep in the body.
Mm.
So this is why I call, body, business, bank account. We want to bring this soul aligned vision down starting through the body, and then it can kind of mirror out into how we create in our businesses, how we create in our finances. So that is why at least from my experience, my expertise, why it can feel so hard and seem so hard. But what I've found is it actually doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. It really doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. But the mastery of this work is how you hold yourself through this change, because this beautiful brain of ours is going to kick out with a lot of stories, a lot of beliefs, a lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions, and nervous system, like physiological responses against that big vision. And it's how we handle that reaction or the contraction against the very thing that you want that is where the mastery comes in, from my point of view anyway. And holding yourself through what can feel very scary, that can feel very risky, that can feel very uncomfortable. And there's times where I feel like I'm dying. I'm a bit dramatic, but hey, you might as well name it.
Dude, I think, but a part of you is, right? Like there's that part of yourself, that part of your story, that old way of doing it, of believing it, of protecting yourself. Like, I mean, for us to become something different, the old one does have to, in a word, die, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And
And
it
it's sort of,
is hard.
yeah, it feels hard. I think I've been a birth doula and a death doula. And I kind of think part of what I call manifestation mastery, or manifesting your heart, body, soul, mind, vision, your authentic self into the world, is learning how to die, like consciously dying, which is like consciously letting go, consciously surrendering. And I think that life, if we're truly alive in our authentic self, is a continual birth and death process. Which I've, learned the hard way, because I didn't, I've realized, oh, we're constantly shedding the old snake skin, or, but going from the caterpillar through the cocoon into the butterfly. Like this is actually happening. This is nature. Just look at, look at the weather, look at the seasons. It's constantly shedding and shifting and changing, growing, dying, growing, dying. And yet human beings, we're like, we're like, it must stay exactly the same. We're like, we're going to suffocate life. We
For real.
don't need for control and power. So it's crazy, but it's also the most natural thing.
Oh, so I told you before we started recording that just the abundance of us doing this today and the energy that we're both bringing to this conversation, like I'm so thankful for it. And part of that for me is yesterday, I had this gigantic epiphany around control and surrender, and how, like, exactly what you were describing with, like, I call it the moat. Like, I'm here and what I want is right there, but there's like this moat around me that, like, it can't come in. Like, there's no bridge, And that separation from me and what I want. And I realized yesterday that what is the moat? Control. And what
Mm,
is the bridge? Surrender. And
mm,
surrender sounds like just, I don't know, like it should be maybe the easiest thing in some ways. And it's also the hardest thing in so many other ways. And I also want to tap in here that I learned that, like, control is a trauma response, like how you brought in like the big T trauma, the little T trauma. Like, we learn how to control, like, as a self-protection mechanism. And to surrender is essentially saying, like, stop trying to protect yourself. And our mind and body is like, fuck that. Not doing it. Like, no, no.
yeah.
And so control, surrender, really anything, any light you can shine into that dynamic, I would greatly appreciate, because this is right where I am, right here, right now. I can see right what I want, multiple elements of my life, and they need me to surrender. Help me. Help me.
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. Lara is amazing. There's all kinds of links in the description box if you want to dive more into her work and her world. As far as supporting this channel and the work that I am doing, the best thing you can do, and probably the easiest thing you can do, is to like this video down below, put a little thumbs up on it, a little thumbs up action, and join my mailing list so that you stay in the loop on anything and everything that I am offering in this owning authenticity world. I so greatly appreciate you being here and every ounce of energy that you shine on this work, sharing it with your friends, sharing it with your networks, forwarding the live events that I do, all the things, helping to grow this community of souls practicing owning their authenticity. It's a beautiful thing. It's a world-changing thing. And I thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. And what I want to say about control is there's ways that you might be consciously aware that you're controlling, but there's a lot of unconsciousness around it. Like, it's a deep hardwired nervous system response of just right. So it's quite reactive. And this really, I think it's mastery. So you're right that when we finally, so my first steps to manifestation mastery is relax, release. It's like, oh, great. That sounds so great. Just relax. Just release. Oh, yeah. Right. But actually, what we've learned is that actually deeply relaxing, deeply resting, really releasing. And so I call it mastery, because you can't fake that. You have to be it. And part of the self that has not felt safe and may have in real life really not been safe, you've developed patterns of protection. I call it padding of protection, ways to survive, right? Whether it's that big T, little t, ways to feel safe. And you will have a lot of data and evidence to back the fact that you are not safe if you surrender, right? It's like, hey, wait a minute, excuse me, objection, objection, Your Honor. Like, this is not okay. So it's kind of like we're battling these different parts. The only way that I've figured out how to hack this system is to follow my soul. Because my little small self, my human self, my little Lara, has a very different story and a very different point of view to what my soul tells me.
Mm.
And so what I do is I spend time really discerning, like, and really deeply listening. What am I being guided to actually do? And this is, again, part of mastery, because I mean, the image that I got from my guidance was like, jump off the cliff with no parachute. Like I was like, it is like you're telling me. I saw this edge of the cliff and I looked down and it was just like black. Like I couldn't even see the floor. So I'm like, you are asking me, soul self, to jump off the cliff with no parachute. And I could feel myself like clinging onto the edge. It's like, of course we're not going to do that. That would be madness. But that's what it felt like to me. Or sometimes it felt like I was being asked to walk into the fire, like walk into a fire and just burn to death. Like that's what it felt like to me. When,
Yeah.
especially, I've gotten a bit better at walking through the fire and jumping off the cliff, but it just screams survival, it screams risk. So that's what we're dealing with, the survival brain, and what we do when we're in the unknown. And especially with the funny, not funny thing is our soul is often guiding us to face our deepest wounds. Like it's literally leading you into your deepest shit so you can heal.
Yeah.
So it's like your purpose and your pain is absolutely, I call it the wounds in your work. Like they're dancing together.
Mm.
So that's kind of part of it as well. And that's why I love working with business and I love working with money, because it's all designed to actually bring you home to yourself fundamentally.
Yeah.
So just first I want to talk around like the reality of the challenge of surrender, but also how I navigate that is just to listen to the soul. And it doesn't always make logical sense.
Mm.
It doesn't always make logical sense. I'm asked to let go of things that I really want or that I have attachments to, right? And I'm asked to lean into things that maybe I don't even think I want or that feel bad to me. And it takes me a while to be like, I need to understand like a little bit about why I'm being asked to either let go of something I'm attached to or say yes to something that I don't think I want.
Mm-hmm.
Money was one of them. Business was another one. I had zero interest in either of those things. So it took me, I had quite a lot of objections about that as well. Or things around family, or certain friends, or, being asked to let go of certain relationships where I have like a wounded attachment pattern with. So it's pretty intense. So how I do it is, I meditate with my soul, I journal, I spend time to listen. And then what's a really important piece is to what I call to hold the wounded self or the traumatized self or the little self or the small self. We have to build safety. And I think what I again learned the hard way, having my ass kicked over and over and like not being able to move forward, is this safety piece is really important. How do we do this in a way that, because if you go too fast or you take too big a leap, it can actually re-traumatize you, and it's a real interesting dance around capacity. And so your soul self, your heart self may be like, this is where you're going, but the body and the human self may not actually be able to fully receive that yet. So on the ground, the vision's beautiful, but on the ground, sometimes it can feel really slow and painful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why is this so hard? Because we've got to shift what's going on physiologically and then also build some systems and structures physically as well. So this is this sort of dichotomy. It's like the wound and the work. And it needs a lot of patience and a lot of compassion towards yourself, because you're like, the moat is there. What I want is there. Why can't I just surrender and cross the moat? And sometimes, yes, it's just about taking that leap 100%. And that's why we've got to listen. But sometimes it's like, I need a bit more support. I need some more safety here, so I feel like I can move forward. So like for me, I felt so alone and so unsupported and unmet and unhelped on a very, very deep level. And that was tied into my trauma, but it was also mirroring. I had manifested that. It wasn't like I was making it up. So part of growing, being me now and being more visible and being more public and being out and growing my business has been about pillars of support. I've needed to have enough people who are at my back and have my back that built a sense of safety, that no matter what happens, there's going to be someone there with me That was one of the pieces. My guidance showed me that. Like I kept being shown all these pillars of support, and I didn't really understand what that was because I'd never experienced that type of support before. I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
And then I was like, these are humans or systems like within my business that hold me and support me. So I get to feel safe. And it took me a long time to understand that piece.
Yeah.
So honestly, everything I'm talking about now has been years and years and years of like bashing my head against a brick wall. So there's the above, what I call the above ground, which is like the vision. And then there's the below ground, which is the support and structure, the infrastructure that's kind of in the physical realm. And
Mm.
it's important that both are there. It's like the roots of the tree and the branches, they
Yeah.
both need to be there. And the issue with the spiritual and the 5D and all that is that it's very disassociated from physical reality. So, and I was disassociated from physical reality because of my trauma, because I didn't want to feel the pain that was living inside of me. And that's why I couldn't move forward. So I'll stop there because I'm going off on one, but how's that
That
landing?
that was all amazing. And again, like I'm receiving so many expanded understandings as you're talking. So like I need to go back and rewatch this and like get the notes and like process. But what you said at the end, I feel like is a really important piece to understand about like what does that mean being disassociated from reality? Like what does that actually look like? What are the symptoms of that? Because I think that's where a lot of people are. Like in the spiritual community is like they know what they want, some of them, and it's not happening, not happening, not happening, not happening. And I think this is one of the main reasons is that
Yeah.
it's not embodied or it's not grounded. But like, again, these are all just words to some people, and you have such a lived experience of it. I wonder if you have like some examples of like, what does it actually look like when one is disassociated from the 3D?
Well, goodness. I mean, yeah. And I just want to say that I was there. So there's no judgment. There's no, there's no judgment, but I see a lot of people kind of spinning in these cycles, like the spiritual maze, I call it. And it's sad because we all have these very gifted, talented people with all these gifts and all these tools that aren't really able to lend them into life. And I do think that that is what we need to do is plant the seeds, put them in the ground. There are lots of things that are stopping and blocking people from being fully manifest, because what this really is about you being fully manifest. To manifest what you want, you need to be manifest as well. Not always, you can manifest without that. And what that means is really about coming home to your body. So a lot of spiritual tools and practices get you kind of really connected to the higher chakras, more like the heart and throat and brow and crown. And you can kind of float up and out, which is wonderful because it creates this sort of peace. And like I've had someone's like getting high, like so many psychedelic experiences in that is beautiful. But we also have to bring it down through the body. And so a lot of the work that I do, which is around money blocks and blocks around business and blocks around relationships and intimacy and home and really the grounded physical stuff, really live in the lower centers. So the solar plexus, the sacral, and the root chakras, those lower parts of the body, which is also where our trauma lives. And all of the kind of a lot of safety stuff with power, creativity, sexual energy, and real safety and security around the base chakra, the lower center.
Mm.
So the work to manifest, the work to ground is to clear the ground, clear the foundations. And there's obviously neuroscience, like there's different ways to explain it. Mine's a bit more spiritual and kind of archetypal, if you will. There's very practical ways to explain it around nervous system regulation. So a lot of us were firing constantly in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, like triggered response. And when that happens, when you feel unsafe, which a lot of people, including myself, is that's firing like all day long, if you're out there, if you're trying to be out there connecting with other humans or whatever, that creates a lot of story. And well, particularly these last years, see a lot of people going down a lot of conspiracy theory rabbit holes. Um, I see a lot of people spending a lot of energy in subjects that might be interesting, but they don't actually move their life forward. So getting hyper fixated on subjects that might be interesting and maybe they're useful for a time, but they're kind of pulling you out of your life rather than into your life. Um, and we find ways to distract. So, there's all sorts of ways we can do that, social media, but also things like we suppress and numb as well. So might be drugs, alcohol, food, hyperfixating on other issues, other problems in the world, but they're all kind of designed to distract you from actually moving forward with your life.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you go into that triggered response and you go into a spin. I mean, my brain will just hyperfixate, or one of my patterns was hyperfixating on other people's problems. So I would get obsessed with other people's problems. Like,
Yeah.
how can I help everyone else with their problems? Where I'm like, and yourself?
Yeah.
And you? So I was very much like wanting to heal and help and give, but I was actually not wanting to really feel and be present with myself. Right?
Yeah.
Which is, double-edged sword. It's taught me a lot of amazing things. But so I would say, and then at the core, I mean, there's so many different examples, but sometimes, clients who've worked with me, like sometimes on a deeper level, unearth suppressed trauma, like sexual trauma, for example, sexual abuse or violence, or even things that you wouldn't call or look at as typically traumatic, but things that were said or yeah, like there's lots of things that maybe wouldn't seem like a big deal. The other thing, I mean, I could give you a million and one examples, but a lot of clients come up against about also being bullied at school, or like there's all these little moments where that happen through life where there was a shutdown, or there was like, I'm not safe, or there was a choice made to basically not be yourself.
Mm.
And there's a lot of that, as you start sifting through. So it's really about getting really honest what was there, but trying not to get caught up in the story of it. And that's the challenge, I think, is like, just how do we go through that conscious death process where we're like, just going to let this go now. That's part of the surrendering of control too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to feel it. And I would say the number one block, the number one thing, after having said all of this, it is so simple, but honestly, this is it. The number one thing that blocks people from manifesting what they want is a feeling that they don't want to feel.
It's so true.
It's just a feeling.
Yeah.
That feeling could be shame. That feeling could be fear. That feeling could be anger. That feeling could be loneliness.
Boredom.
That boredom. I mean, not good enough, not deserving. Oh, not worthy. And actually the mastery then to actually dismantle a lot of this is to be with the feeling and alchemize it through the power of your presence. It's a very, very simple practice, but when you're in the middle of a trigger, your whole system's going to fire off and take you down all these rabbit holes if you don't catch it.
Mm.
So it's really important then. One of my biggest top tips is never take action from a reaction. Never take action from a reaction, because your reactive self isn't your soul self. It's your sort of trauma self or your survival self.
Right. Self-protective self. Yeah.
Yeah, less that part. And that part's going to fire off without any energy. That doesn't take energy to have a reaction. That just happens. What takes
Mhm.
energy is holding that, being with it, feeling the feelings you don't want to feel, alchemizing it, and then really tuning in. And it's coming home to the body, anchoring home into the body. And most people just aren't in their body. They're not fully present in their body. They're not fully present in life because we feel so intensely.
Yeah. Right. Being
Yeah,
with the
so
feeling is a intense experience
it is. Yeah.
when you could just go into story. which is to
Yeah.
say, like, remember and repeat what it is, like, watch the movie again of what you think happened back then, versus be with the feeling, like you said, like you listed off all those feelings of like shame and loneliness and not good enough. And like, those are scary sounding feelings, and they're sensations. Like they're physical sensations in the body. Like you can find like, oh, there's heat on my skin. There's a
Mm.
queasy feeling in my stomach. There's like, you can find the physical sensations, but again, that takes so much presence and holding and witnessing and not going into the story or making it mean something about you. And so, yes,
Yeah.
like so much easier said than done. There's a reason the word mastery has come up in this conversation a bunch of times because it takes practice. Um, but yeah, like I wonder, like for people, because I think like a lot of the people around this channel are in the work. They're doing it. They're holding themselves. They're witnessing their triggers. They're well along the way of owning their authenticity and opening up those previous shutdown points. Like as you were talking about that, I had this vision of like one of the reasons why owning authenticity is so freaking hard because when it's not safe to be you and you have that shutdown, and then you build an identity on top of the shutdown.
Oh, yeah.
And then to like open that back up, it's not just like, well, just open it back up. It's like you've got a whole life built on top of a foundation that if you want to take away the foundation and open it back up, that entire life is going to like fall into the fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe even like I've heard it say, like when you start meditating, when you start coming home to yourself, like it's normal for your life to explode, is another way I've heard it said. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about like those identities that we create to protect ourselves that really then prevent us from being with ourselves? Like I know there's
Yeah.
kind of a broad umbrella there. Feel free to take it in whatever direction you're
Mm.
inspired to.
Yeah, it's the same where I said when you start trying to manifest what you want, like what often happens is you start manifesting what you don't want. And it's like, and I used to be like, how come when I'm trying to go for what I want, everything that I don't want is up in my face? And it's because it's like everything that needs to be clear that is out of alignment with that gets amplified because it needs to actually come down or it needs to transform or be alchemized.
Mm.
So before we go into the identity deaths, what I would say, I want to come back to the safety piece again,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a way to do this without blowing up your life.
Love it.
Sometimes life gets blown up, things happen, right? And that's quite shocking and that's quite hard. And you know, things happen, right? Unexpected things happen. And sometimes that's the way it happens and needs to happen. But if we can be on the front foot and work with this consciously and mindfully, it doesn't have to be so destructive. And why I say this is because one of my biggest fears was I always thought if I am myself, like I'm going to blow up my life. And I was so terrified of that. I was so terrified of the power of what I was being asked to do. But my guidance, my soul self showed me how to do it one step at a time in a non-violent way.
Mm.
So what I want to say is this following your heart and soul is the path of non-violence, but it doesn't always feel like it's not violent, if that makes sense, because you're up against, historical, maybe a sort of a historical violence and as well. And that can, you can see that from the external, but it's really where you're using that against yourself as kind of an inner violence, a self-harm,
Yeah.
a self-rejection. And that's like, we can't control what's going on in the outside world. We can try, like you might be guided to do certain things. The only thing you can really, really control, even though we're not trying to control, the only thing you can really consciously choose to change is yourself. And so that's the first thing I just want to say is let's, hold spaces. Why sometimes going slower is better. Like going
Mm.
fast is not necessarily better. Slow, steady, and sustainable are my like favorite words. Yes, some things will go fast, but it's like it's all about how you hold yourself through change.
Mhm.
So yes, so we build up a lot of, I guess, false identities, or for all sorts of reasons. Like, if especially if you've got praise for being in a particular way, like being a good girl or
Yeah, yeah.
being kind or being sweet, or mine was like, just shut up and be pretty. It's kind of like the vibe. It's like, be good. And I was not good. And I didn't know what I didn't fit into that. I tried, but I was really not very good at it. My middle sister was really good at it. So she was like the A star personality type, and she did all the right things. And I felt like a piece of shit growing up.
Mhm.
But actually, in some ways, it's been a bit harder for her now, because, she had a lot of, she built up a sense of self that was designed to please our parents or society. And I didn't succeed at that so much, but I had other ways that it was like, I got the only praise I got was excelling in sport. And so I would push myself really hard. But then I think what was it? There's been lots of identities, but one was even my identity as a healer. I had to let go of.
Mm.
I've been the wounded healer, I call it, or my identity as a healer had to also die, which was very hard because I'd actually built a business on that identity. And it was like who I was. It was my own identity, because I'd found home and I'd found safety with that. But then
Mm.
it got to the point where it was like a little bubble that at some point my guidance was like, shh, and now it's time to burst. It was right for a time.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
needed it. It was my safe little womb space. So the other thing with identities is it's sometimes they're built from, learned behavior. And sometimes there are things that are right for a season. It's like it was right at the time it was right. And I still am a healer. Like, that part of me is part of me, but the identity I had around who I thought I had to be. So it was very light and love. Like, I had to be light and love and light and love. And
Mhm.
what wasn't included is the fact that I'm quite fiery. I'm very passionate. I've got a wild side. Like, it meant that my spiritual healer identity didn't include a whole other part of myself that I needed to manifest. Right.
Yeah.
So it was, and that was like, every stage has been quite hard and confusing. And it's like been like dying to an old identity, but also to an old life.
Yeah.
And even like identity of a mother, identity as a wife, and all the things so my point is that there are certain things that are certain identities that are built and developed to kind of stay safe, or to get love, or to get that positive reinforcement from the external world. And then there's identities of like phases of your life, of who you've been and how you've been, that there's lots to it. Like, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's societal, sometimes it's family, but sometimes it's just yourself putting that on yourself, who you
Mm.
think you need to be. So it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. And I guess the ending on that would be like, we have many parts. We are, you could say in the spiritual world, we're multidimensional, but we also have many parts of ourselves. There's a body of work that I haven't studied myself, but called Integrated Family Systems, which is IFS, which is really talks about this. This is always what I've seen. It's like one person is made of many different parts.
Mhm.
And so we're not just one thing,
Yeah.
you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's another thing to remember is I think we just love everything to be so linear and binary. And the facts are it's not binary.
Yeah.
It's not. And I think our poor little brains were like, how could I box this in and control this? And that's it's stressful. So I bless our little brains.
Bless our little brains. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's part of like the identification process that we go through inside of ourselves, is like wanting to understand ourselves, wanting
Mm.
to make sense of the massive contradictions and the like, what is the purpose of all of this that I live with on a daily basis? Like, surely it's for something. And I also love the compassion and the unshaming of like, just because you were identified with something for a time and then you changed or like let something go or it died and now you're this other way. Like it's right for a season. It's right for when it's right. Like I
Mm.
really love that point to like you weren't wrong because you were there for a while and now you're over here. Like you're allowed to change, you know? Like, and if anything, it goes back to what you were saying of like, it's very natural. It's very in alignment with nature that like things grow and they change and they go dormant for a while and then they come back to life and then they're different. And like, that's just what we are. And bless our little brains, like, not cool. Not cool with that. But I do
Yeah.
wonder, we're nearing the end of our window together, and this freaking flew by, which it was exactly what it needed to be for this day. And I'm so grateful for your energy. I wonder if there is anything else on your heart, on your mind, on your soul, on your lower centers, like anywhere that wants to come in as like a cherry on top for this conversation to leave people with.
Yes. So who you are, I see very much like a seed of consciousness. So if you think of a seed, the seed knows how to grow if it's put in the right environment, right? The right soil, the right pot, right space, water, light, right? It knows what to become when it's in the right environment. And that's the same for you, that there's a seed of consciousness inside of you. And just like a seed, we have to put it in the deep, dark soil for it to grow. And same with you. You need to go into the deep, dark soil in order to grow. The deep, dark soil for our brain looks like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Right? It's like, it's deep, it's dark, it might be lonely. We can't see, we don't know what's happening. It's the unknown.
Yeah.
But if we can hold yourself in the space of the unknown, which is the mastery of manifestation as well,
Yeah.
and listen to the wisdom of our body of what is the environment that I need to grow and thrive. And it doesn't mean burning everything down. It's just, what can I add? What can I add? What do I need to include in my life that's going to hold me and support me in order to grow? And it
Mm.
might seem illogical, it might feel confusing, but listening, what does this seed need to grow?
Yeah.
What does this unique plant need to grow? This unique tree?
Yeah.
And then trust, just like with the seed, the roots will start to crack. So there's the pressure of the seed and then crack, right? So there's going to be a pressure of life. Life will be putting pressure on you to crack into life
Wow.
and to try and breathe into it. And that might look like everything going badly, crack, right? In order for the shoots to grow down into even the deeper depths of the unknown.
Wow.
But at the same time, the other part, the shoot, there'll be another shoot that's drawing up into life to meet the light. And if you imagine being a little shoot, it's a very vulnerable place to be.
Yeah.
And so a part of you that's being called to emerge into life is going to feel very vulnerable and feel very unsafe.
Yeah.
And this is again why we need to think about, what does it need? Does it need a little greenhouse? Like what, like, does this shoot, like, what do we need to do to help it grow? Like maybe it's
Yeah.
not ready to be planted out into the woods yet. Maybe it needs to be held a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It's vulnerability, even though it's power, it's vulnerability. And given enough time, the roots will grow deeper and the shoot will grow higher and will get stronger and stronger and stronger and be able to
Mm.
grow into life and be stronger. And so I would say, like, be the tree you came here to be,
Yeah.
which is powerful trunk, deep roots, branches going high. So we're reaching into life and we're rooting into the ground and we're
Mm.
holding
Mm.
steady like anchors. And this is always what my guidance shows me again and again, is you're growing into this tree, which is going to become more and more strong and resilient, but not necessarily right away, right? There might be that little or of a visibility, but it might not even be out as visible yet. There's parts that are still growing in the deep, dark soil. And
Yeah.
this is part of, we have to be patient with the growth process. If you keep showing up, doing the work, right? And this is the bit where for me, it's always the soul guidance that shows me what the hell's going on. Because my brain's like, what the F is going on? And my
Yeah.
soul's like, chill,
Yeah.
relax,
It's
release,
happening.
hold.
Yeah.
It's happening. Just you need to chill out now, Miss
Yeah.
Impatient One, right?
Which is
And
so countercultural,
so countercultural.
where it's like
And
run faster, do more, be more,
yeah,
hustle.
harder, faster, hustle.
Yeah.
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 And sometimes that's the right thing, but it's not always the right thing. Sometimes that's actually getting in the way of the growth that wants to happen. So it's
Yeah.
very counterintuitive and very cultural,
Mm.
but it's ancient wisdom that we're
Yeah.
tapping back into. When we bring it down and into the ground, we are really coming back to the ancient wisdom. So our bodies know that too. That's the
Mhm.
thing. We have historical ancestral trauma, but we also have historical ancestral wisdom. And we are
Yes.
remembering that through this work as well.
Mm. So good. So freaking good. So many images and visuals. And yeah, just again, like my understanding of all of these got to expand as we sat here. So thank you so much for everything that you have done, all the brick walls that you have ever beat your head against on behalf of all of us in the collective to be able to accelerate our understanding. Like I know that that was not easily earned, and I am so grateful that you went through it.
Thank
Mm.
you. I've got a lot of scars on my forehead. I actually literally do because when I was little, I kept bashing into things literally.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for the acknowledgement
Oh,
because it has been an intense road to get here.
yeah, no
But I
doubt.
guess there was my soul self was just like there's something in me that just won't quit. Like it's because it's such a strong calling, and I have committed to following it. I made a
Yeah.
decision to listen and to follow, and it's never failed me actually, even though it doesn't
Mm,
always make sense. Every time I'm on another edge right now, I'm just like, oh my God, like, and I have to remember we've been here before. Like it
yeah.
looks like it's right, and I'm constantly in the game, so that's also why I can speak to it. And I've been like a little crazy detective trying to figure out what's blocking, what's blocking, what's blocking, what's blocking. And
Yeah.
I might in 10 years, I might have a very different answer. But anyways, here we are. And it's an absolute pleasure to be connected with you and to speak with
Amazing.
you and everyone who's listening. Thank you for having
Amazing.
me.
Amazing. If people would like to dive more into your world, where would they find you?
So I'm all over social media, but they can come to my website, larawaldman.com. I've got a podcast called Money Manifestation Mastery that's on all the podcast platforms. That would be a really great. I've got all my tools and steps there. On my website, you can come and I've got like free giveaways. I've got lots of resources to tap into. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. So you can find me, Lara Waldman, um, on all those platforms as well.
Fantastic. Amazing. I I have no doubt that there were like I see like all these little popcorns of activations of clarity and the awareness of what is next, like what is my next step? And so often the next step is like, how do I bring this more into my body? How do I anchor this more onto the planet by anchoring
Yeah,
it within myself first, right? Like
100%.
the feeling comes first. It can be so intense to hold the feeling, but that's the
Yeah.
mastery, holding the feeling, being with the sensation in your beautiful body. Thank you so much for demystifying some of this for us. As much as we can pack into an hour, I feel like we did it. It's amazing. Masterful work. Good job. Oh, I
Yeah.
love it. I love you. I love everybody who's watching. I am so excited for this time, this 2024 time that we are living in, that we intended to be here for. Thank you so much to everyone who watched. Thank you, Laura, for being here. And I hope everyone will take really good care of themselves. The energies are cranking up, and carving out time to be gentle and compassionate with your beautiful body and mind makes all the difference. Mm.
Beautiful.